Welcome to the show today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. As you may have noticed, I'm wearing the same shirt over and over again. We shot a lot of these episodes the same day, but appreciate you tuning in to Unaborted with Seth Gruber. If you're listening to this episode by now, you'll know that I have moved my family to Kansas to give my family greater support in these crazy times as I travel and participate in the abortion wars, the most important topic in the culture wars, and launch my new organization, the White Rose Resistance. But before I left California, I wanted to have my good friend Bryce Eddy on the show. He is the host of Liberty Station here at Godspeak Calvary Chapel, co-hosted by Rob Mccoy, the fearless leader and pastor of Godspeak Calvary Chapel, and who co-founded Turning Point Faith with Charlie Kirk, and has become an Ezekiel watchman and pastor for our times and our cities. Bryce Eddy is a good friend of our families. His daughters babysat my children. He is a black belt Brazilian Jiu Jitsu ninja. He is a successful entrepreneur and businessman, and he's quite a deadly man as well. And God has used him powerfully in a lot of different ways in this Kairos moment that we all sense is so important for Christians to start asserting influence and stewardship and responsibility for what God has given them to promote life, to promote liberty, and to stand on behalf of the rights of our neighbors. But nowhere is the assault on our neighbors and the silence of men and the church more pronounced than on the slaughter of unborn children, who are killed at the tune of 1 million a year, at least, because states don't have to report their abortion data, so it's actually big one statistical hole. Over 65 million children killed in America since 1973 with Roe versus Wade, which just got overturned. And if there was ever a more important and significant time for men to start acting like men, it would be right now, as we just had the Emancipation Proclamation political equivalent of our generation and lifetime with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Bryce Eddy is a trusted fellow, friend, and brother of mine, and I think you're going to enjoy our conversation. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted. Bryce, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. This is fun. By the way, I need you to be my hype man every time. That's great.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we have had so many conversations before where afterwards we were like, man, that could have been a podcast episode. People would have loved that, you know. And we have a lot of fun talking about all the issues, really. But you've been such a supportive friend, and our family loves you and your family, and God uses you just in so many different ways. And I was like, man, we gotta finally have you on my podcast and talk about everything that's happening. So first, just tell people a little bit about yourself so they can get to know Bryce Eddy.
Well, I appreciate that, and you and I talked. We'll probably throw this on Liberty Station as well, because this will be a fun talk.
And tell people about Liberty Station too.
If
they don't know.
Well, we're launching on Salem's podcast network. Here in a couple of weeks, and we've got something like 74 episodes in the bag already.
Awesome.
And our whole thing is about being a threat to the Great Reset. So
nice.
we're pretty wide on the topics that we're talking about.
Yeah,
really,
that's great.
Some of it's current events driven and everything that's happening right now. But a lot of it is really just about, how do we fight this, battle, which, obviously you're part of the front lines on that.
That's
with,
right.
Abortion, which is, and I think you just said it's the greatest front in the culture war, and I agree. And so, I'm thrilled to, sit here and talk to you about it. But yeah, I mean, for me, I've just been blessed that, God put me in the position to to have a mouth that, talks fast and is able to talk about whatever. But, being here at Godspeak and, spending the time like we did where, Rob courageously stood up against, the local oppressive tyrant, in our local government and then the state and all of that.
Yes.
And God called me to be a part of it. I'm unafraid when it comes to the criticism from the left. And, we had a local battle here against, some teachers that were inappropriately grooming kids, and giving them videos on transgender stuff, and and it stirred up the whole community.
And you've been standing with one of the fathers.
Yeah, and I was willing to take those.
Came after you. They were like,
they bought transgender T-shirts in my name, and there were things like that. What they don't understand is I don't really care to be liked. It doesn't really bother me.
Well, it's actually it's the ultimate compliment. So people have come up to me that someone just said this at Stanford. I got into it with some students at Stanford meeting. Rhetorically, I got into it with them, and it was like it got to 20 students or more who were just livid. They looked like deer in the headlights at first with me, and then they were like screaming bloody murder and rending their garments. And one of the women came up to me afterwards, when they obviously had no arguments, to defend their pro-choice position, and said basically something like, "I just donated to Planned Parenthood in your name." Yeah. The same thing, and they're buying trans. So it's actually like the ultimate compliment. It's like, wow, so you see me as a threat? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because these are the same people that they say that words are violence. Right?
right. But abortion's healthcare.
Yeah. No, it's truly they're out of their minds, and their arguments don't stand up to any scrutiny, which, I mean, and I know you talk about it on the show all the time. There's no, logical sense of, in their minds when life begins. That's always a moving target.
Right.
And I remember replying to a tweet one time where I said, everybody knows when life begins. It's when you ascribe it value that's really the debate, because that really is.
Right.
They want to play about when it's really when the baby feels pain, when this. Well,
the Nazis did the same thing, Bryce.
Well, of course.
They had a phrase. It was Lebensunwertensleben, and it meant life unworthy of life.
Yeah.
Translated, that phrase means life unworthy of life, Bryce. And so what do we take from that? That the Nazis were admitting that Jews were life.
Yeah.
But they were unworthy of the value, the protections therein. So the pro-choice movement does the same thing today. Unwanted pregnancy is the pro-choice equivalent of Lebensunwertensleben.
Yeah.
Because they're admitting it's a human being, it's a life. I could tell you, Faye Waddleton, Planned Parenthood president, 1997, in an interview with Miss Magazine. Okay, this is a Planned Parenthood president, Bryce, who said, I think we have deluded ourselves into believing that people don't know that abortion is killing. So any pretense that abortion is not killing is a signal of our ambivalence, a signal that we cannot say, yes, it kills a baby. That's a Planned Parenthood president from 1997. Wow. So my point is this. They're like the Nazis in the sense that they admit that their victim class are human beings. They represent life, but they're unworthy of the protection of life.
Well,
which is what you just said.
Yeah, and with all these things, what they do, and this game is played on the left with everything.
Yep.
Okay, and the right doesn't do it. This is their, I believe, a unique characteristic. But they use euphemisms for everything.
Yeah.
Homelessness is a euphemism. Pro-choice is a euphemism. They always do that, and they use those euphemisms, for as long as they can until they start to admit the quiet parts out loud.
And then they have to pick a new one. It's what Steven Pinker called the euphemism treadmill.
I didn't realize that's actually great. Great word to use.
Once the society and the people start to awaken to the fact that the term you've been using to describe this evil thing is evil in and of itself, because it's referring to an evil thing. And once the people start to wake up to that, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have to jump onto their euphemism treadmill and spin out a new phrase. Yeah. And so they moved from women's rights in the sexual revolution to equality, to healthcare.
Right.
To choice. And now check this out, Bryce. A bunch of people on the left, and I forget the mainstream leftist publication, but like 4 weeks ago, like a month ago, some of the Democrats were calling for abandoning the word choice. They didn't want people to use the word choice anymore, and they were trying to come up with a new, I think it was, decision. Yes, a bunch of pro-aborts got together on the Democrat Party, and they said, we need to stop using the word choice. We need to start using the word decision. Why? You've been using pro-choice for years. What happened? The euphemism treadmill. Yeah. Because you had things like our buddy A.J. Hurley, who were unboxing murdered children, some of them in the third trimester, because the waste management company driver that picks up the mutilated children from the Washington, D.C. Surgery Center abortion clinic gave some of these boxes to pro-lifers. So you have incidents like this where abortion starts to get a face, and the public realizes, oh, that's kind of an ugly face. Like, abortion's kind of like a bad thing, and so you have to pick a new word.
Yeah, they have to shift gears.
Anyways, you were saying these people always come up with new euphemisms.
Yeah, they do, and that's a characteristic of the left, and so that's why I always try to just keep resetting it and
Yeah.
using the truth. Listen, this is a pro-abortion thing. You guys are
That's right.
pro-baby murder. Okay,
Yeah,
fine,
yeah,
we
yeah,
get
yeah.
it. Just admit it. Just say that this is what you want. Let's
Well,
not
remember
talk
here
about
in our home state here at California, Bryce, I mean, I guess if people are listening to this, I live in Kansas now, but, they were pushing AB 2223, which was basically going to provide cover and protections for anyone who might murder a baby up to 27 days after birth. And the key phrase in that legislation was the word perinatal. And when you look up the definition of perinatal, you get a few different definitions, but most of them, that's a term that's referring to the baby after it's born up to 28 days after birth. And so what this AB 2223 in California was trying to do, and we had people like Jack Hibbs and some of our favorite people up at the Capitol protesting against this thing a few months ago, was that it would not allow prosecution against women or abortionists in relation to miscarriage, abortion, or perinatal death was the phrase in the legislation. Oh, well, why put that in there? Like, even if you're just pro-choice and you want to protect a woman's right to kill her baby in the womb, then okay, that's fine. So put in women can't be prosecuted for a miscarriage or for an abortion because they're trying to create a sanctuary state for abortion with the falling of Roe v. Wade. But why put in the word perinatal death? Because you want to push it to fourth trimester abortions.
Fourth trimester. Wow.
Infanticide.
Well, and I think part of that is their view, because like take a real life example, a woman delivers, in the Burger King restroom and leaves the baby there to die.
Right.
They want to put her in victim status class. Yeah. And be able to not prosecute her and say, come here, you're safe, whatever you do, kind of a thing. And again, I mean, I know you talk about this a lot. I think it is this, just this evil world of, like a child sacrifice, level evil stuff. Right. And that's what we have going on here. But one of the things that we started to talk about is, masculine responsibility here, because it's interesting. I walked into a restaurant and ran into a wife of a lawyer friend of mine. And, we knew each other pretty well. And I know that she was fairly liberal. And this was the day of or the day after the brief was leaked on Roe v. Wade. And we like naturally, because they were talking about it, and I kind of overheard, them talking about it. I stepped in because I couldn't help myself. And, I'm a combat sports athlete, and sometimes that includes words. But I wanted to kind of like poke and prod a little bit. So I started.
Were they violent words, Bryce?
No,
speech is violence.
Very polite with my words. No name calling or anything. No, and this lady is actually a friend. Like I love her, care about her, and we were able to be pretty civil as a result. Now her friend not so much because her friend didn't know me. Right. And I'm like, well, if you just get to know a conservative, you'd know that was not true. But one of the things, and this is buzzing around online, and I think it's funny because it shows that they do not know how conservatives think. Totally. But she said to me at one point, well, if abortion's going to be, illegal and we can't do it, then, and life supposedly begins at conception, then you as a man should be responsible from the moment of conception. And I'm like, okay, you can take that deal.
Sounds
we can
great.
Start negotiations right there. Sounds great.
Yeah.
And
I'll support legislation that makes men financially responsible for the children they procreate.
Yeah, and the look on her face was a little bit of like stunned, like that's not what we'd be advocating. But yes, we are. We're advocating for responsibility on the side of the woman, and we're advocating for responsibility on the side of the men.
That's right.
And the great evil that is abortion, I believe, is because men have abdicated their responsibility. Now, I believe the great evils that are dominating our society all over the place are because men have abdicated their responsibilities, and we're seeing the results of that. And that's a theme that I talk about on our show regularly. Yep. Because it is men's failures that are leading to the absolute destruction of everything that made Western culture great.
But Bryce, men and women are equal. There's no distinction between the sexes, and therefore there's no special duties that men have over women in any given certain moral circumstance. Don't you know this, you bigot?
Yeah. Well, misogynist, I think, is what I am by saying that men have responsibilities.
How many women were at the beaches in Normandy, by the way?
Yeah. You know what? I don't know because I wouldn't assume any of their genders. But, these days you never know.
Yeah, that's right.
No, and what's scary, and I think you and I have talked about this, and you and I had awesome out in the middle of Montana discussions about all sorts of things. I think I trolled you for a little while. I was having fun with that, getting you wound up. Not hard to do.
That's right.
But no, it was fun. But I've been talking about on our show over and over again, because we've been talking about it for years, actually, that we're coming into a incredibly dangerous and violent period of time. And there's a book written by Peter Turchin called Ages of Discord that goes into the science behind it. There's books like The Fourth Turning, and there's a bunch of others that kind of show that historical cycles that have to do with generations coming in and generations coming out.
Yep.
It has to do with prosperity. It has
human
to do
nature.
with human nature. All at its core, you can see kind of these patterns. And we have been so prosperous and so over civilized, that now what's happening is, we're leading into really, really dark times.
Yeah.
What's going to lead us out of it is men.
That's right.
And it will be men that, kind of wake up. And so I'm excited because I do believe that the next, I said this in 2020, and I said this on another podcast back then, where we predicted that we would have a summer of riots before George Floyd was killed.
Wow.
We said because this is straight out of the playbook. The unrest that we're going to have in our cities, this is coming, and we're seeing it now with the riots based on abortions, and we're seeing terrorist attacks on pro-life clinics. And,
I think it's over 70 or 80 pro-life organizations have now been defaced or firebombed, Molotov cocktails or whatever. But it's mostly peaceful, I think. But a large amount of those were pro-life pregnancy centers. But there's about 70 or 80 total like pro-life groups in general.
Yeah.
And the other day, when Roe v. Wade got overturned, Bryce, there was a what's the word? An insurrection at the Arizona State Capitol. Yeah, I'm not kidding. According to how the left has defined the term insurrection, there was an insurrection. Yes. Last week at the Arizona State Capitol. I've watched the footage. They were tearing down fences. They were walking over it. Yep. They forced themselves into the Arizona State Capitol. Then they surrounded the second floor above the atrium area, and they were screaming. I mean, that's
a threat to our democracy.
The threat to our democracy. Well, as Michael Knowles always says, anytime they say our democracy, what they really mean is our oligarchy.
Yeah.
And that's becoming abundantly clear.
Sure.
But I love what you were talking about, the cycles of history. And for people who are listening to this, who think we're going on a tangent here, because you listen to this podcast because you like pro-life stuff, you need to understand. I mean, you probably know by now if you listen to my podcast, I speak about the abortion issue in a way larger framework and 60,000-foot view than most pro-life commentators or speakers do. It's the one reason why people love me. It's the one reason why people hate me. It's actually because I'll talk about the vaccine. I'll talk about mandates.
But I think it's good
I'll
because
talk
it's
about
all
riots
connected.
and how it's all connected. The scripture tells us that bloodshed begets bloodshed.
Yep.
The summer of 2020 was a great example of that. We've been sowing bloodshed in the womb, and now we're reaping it in the streets. So I'll talk about all of this, and that's part of why the cycles of history is actually really important to understand too.
Yeah.
And Alexander Tytler, who is a Scottish judge and historian professor at the University of Edinburgh, and you probably heard the Tytler cycle. Mm-hmm. It's powerful. He says we go from bondage to spiritual faith.
Yeah.
From spiritual faith to great courage. From courage to liberty. From liberty to abundance.
Yeah.
From abundance to selfishness. From selfishness to complacency. From complacency to apathy. From apathy to dependency. From dependency back again to bondage. And that explains like so much of human history. Yeah. And so being able to identify where you are in that cycle is actually incredibly powerful information to help you stand in a day like today.
Amen. Well, in the profession of arms, we say hard men create, or strong men create good times create weak men, weak men create hard times, and the cycle kind of repeats itself.
Yeah.
And so we are seeing all of that play out, and it is very much connected. I mean, even the devaluing of life that you get with abortion over, the last many decades is the same thing that leads to active shooters. You know, and people don't realize that. It's that nihilism. It's that nothing really matters. It's that life doesn't matter. All of that sort of stuff over time makes us numb and
You're exactly right.
Willing to do evil because none of it matters.
Mother Teresa said virtually what you just said, Bryce. She said, we should not be surprised when we hear reports of war and murder and violence across our world. For if a mother can kill her own child, what is left for us but to kill one another?
Ooh, that's good. I had no idea. That's great. One of the things, and I've written about this, is as we have lost the moral underpinnings of our culture, and we have pushed more and more towards just implementing of laws, passing laws for the sake of laws.
You know, tyranny of the will.
Laws trying to cover every single iteration of everything that can possibly happen. And I think it was John Adams, has that quote where he talks about our Constitution is suitable for a moral people. And
built for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the governance of any other.
See, I knew you would have that quote chambered. I love it. But that's exactly where we're at right now. And so you're seeing that happen, and it's only going to be a return to masculinity that's going to get us out of this.
Yeah.
And where we're ignoring and all of the women who hate guys that talk this way are freaking out right now that I say that.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But the truth is we were once a far more civilized world. And I say that when we were more civilized, when there could be an expectation of a knuckle sandwich if you got out of line.
It's actually a really great point.
Because we had a structure that really we were more free. We
less
knew that
tolerant.
Yes, we were less tolerant. But
what did Seth just said? Less tolerant? Yes, because you don't understand what the word tolerance actually means.
Well, what's interesting, and I think you've probably talked about this, so stop me. But Matt Walsh articulated this brilliantly. Charlie's picked it up, and I originally heard Matt Walsh say it, but now Charlie's repeating, and I think it's going around because it's the most perfect way to describe what they sold us. And they being the people that are driving these evil ideologies, they first asked for tolerance, that live and let live thing. And I fell for a lot of that too. Like, okay,
remember
fine.
Marriage equality.
Do your thing.
Yeah.
Let your
just
freak
tolerate us.
Let your
marrying
freak
each
flag
other.
fly. Whatever you want to have. Blue hair and weird piercings. Go for it. Whatever. Okay, big deal. You want to marry who you want to marry. Things like that. Okay, I'm not cool with it. But okay, fine. You want us to be tolerant. We because we're nice people and conservatives and Christians and all that stuff. Okay, we'll minister to their hearts. Fine. Whatever.
Right.
Once they had us at tolerance, they then moved to, okay, now we want acceptance.
Yep.
You can't say that my way of life is wrong. You can't say that you have a moral issue with my way of life or what I'm doing or what I'm pushing or what I'm advocating for. And then, okay, we want you to now celebrate it.
Yeah.
Once you shut up and once you're no longer speaking out against it, now we want you to say that it's great, it's good, it's
the cake bigot. Bake the Cake Bigot.
That's right.
Jack Phillips, Colorado.
That's right.
Masterpiece Cake Shop.
Yep. And then we're now at the stage where they want us to participate. They want us to participate in the delusions.
So say the cycle. Say the cycle.
Yeah. Again. So tolerance, acceptance, celebration,
and participation.
And the participation is where we're at now, where we have to have our kids be indoctrinated into these things, and they're forcing.
Remember that Texas things drag the kids to things. It was a drag show, but they were saying drag the kids to the drag show, and they were saying it's not going to lick itself. It's like, okay, wow, we are through the looking glass now, folks.
Yeah, and if you object to that, they literally would like to see us arrested for saying that. So that wait a second, we're not down with that.
Perfect bridge, Bryce, back to abortion. Okay, so how has abortion moved to participation? Right. So it was tolerate abortion in the 1973s.
Safe, legal, and rare.
Right. Safe, legal, and rare. It's a tragedy, but no one wants it, right? Because it never made sense to say that abortion was safe, legal, and rare. Because if you think it should be rare,
right,
then you're acknowledging that it has something morally reprehensible about it. Because why else make it rare? Because if it's healthcare, and abortion is no more different than removing a polyp, Bryce, then why should it be rare?
Yeah.
It never made sense.
No, but at the beginning, remember, it was, look, this is going to happen. And if we ban abortion, and it is illegal and not allowed, we're going to have women dying in the back of alleys with coat hangers. You know, it was that whole argument. So as much as you moral, Christians hate this and believe this is wrong and it's terrible, it's a necessary evil. It's just something that's going to have to exist in a society. And I admit there was a time, in my youth where I was like, okay, all right, I get it exists. Maybe we shouldn't, try to legislate against it. Maybe we should. Maybe we just have to work on the hearts of people to turn them around, to get them to understand that it's wrong. You know, but let's not fight it through other means.
So it started with tolerance.
So admittedly, I was probably there.
Yep.
Then it moves to that acceptance.
And this is when they were saying in the sort of 80s and 90s is when this talking point started. And you remember it, Bryce. It's settled law. The Supreme Court has spoken. It's constitutional. It's never going to get overturned.
You better accept it.
Obviously, it did.
Yeah.
By the way, racists said the same thing to abolitionists. Settled law. Slavery is a part of our life here. Get accustomed to it. And then celebration. And so within my lifetime, we saw this shift from safe, legal, and rare to shout your abortion.
Yeah.
And Amelia Bonnow. I remember her name. Tragic broken woman. She did, I did a year and a half. If someone on this show is like, I've been listening to Seth since he started the podcast, then you might remember an old episode about Amelia Bonnow, because she had this YouTube account, an organization she started called Shout Your Abortion. And she had kids onto this program where she did a whole filmed interaction asking preteens, Bryce, their thoughts about abortion. And some of them were like, it seems kind of wrong. It seems kind of like a baby. And then she would literally be like, well, who are you to tell me what to do with my body? She was bringing kids in to get them to what? To celebrate, to shout your abortion. So, and then we've seen this increasingly in the left, this unapologetic celebration of abortion. And this is why you get people like Chuck Schumer on the steps of the Supreme Court. Some people thought it was recently because it was going viral again, but it was actually from over a year ago when the Louisiana law was being ruled on that was going to force abortion clinics and abortionists to meet the same medical requirements as other ambulatory surgical centers in Louisiana.
Right.
Anyways, we ended up not getting that case because John Roberts stabbed the conservative movement and unborn children in the back and betrayed us once again. Yeah. We got him on Roe versus Wade, which is incredible. But you had Chuck Schumer at that point on the steps of the Supreme Court saying, I want to tell you, Brett Kavanaugh, I want to tell you, Neil Gorsuch, you're going to pay and you're going to release release a wave of storm or whatever, and you're not going to know what hits you if you go forward with these rulings. And so there's this
which all of that's illegal, and they should be arrested immediately.
Of course, yes. He's celebrating abortion. And now we have been actually at the participation point of that for some time now, and I'll prove it to you. The Equality Act. The Equality Act, among many things, was going to force pro-life obstetricians at a federal level to participate with or perform abortions. And pro-aborts have tried to implement this legislation in different states. There was a case from Virginia a few years ago. I might be getting the state wrong. It might have been Illinois. And it was one of the most clear-cut cases of conscience violations in American history. It happened under the Trump administration. Remember Trump's Office of Civil Conscience Protections at the HHS that he started in large part because of religious liberty issues and pro-life issues. And there was a nurse who was told at this hospital that was called in to assist with an abortion. And she was pro-life. She had moral or religious qualms against it. And the abortionist or the doctor, whatever, said, you have to or you're going to be fired. So she was threatened with career termination if she didn't assist with the abortion. To her regret, she participated in it. Yeah. Regretted it, filed slavery. A lawsuit, and it was one of the clearest cut cases of conscience rights violation. Okay, the decision was still pending. The Biden administration comes in, and guess what? Biden's DOJ dropped the lawsuit. So what are they communicating, Bryce? Participate.
Yeah.
Kill this baby or else.
Yeah.
So now, and the Equality Act would have federalized this, is all that was my point. And not only would it force us to use pronouns and all of these various things, but the Equality Act would have said, it would have added pregnancy as a condition of sex within the civil rights protections of the 1960s. And so if you didn't grant a woman an abortion, you could be sued for pregnancy discrimination. For not giving the abortion. So,
well, in a free society,
participate in evil.
Yeah, well, in a free society, we labor is a free exchange. You know, I'm giving you my labor, you're giving me something. So to do something like that is engaging in slavery.
That's right. Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I don't have this up, but another because we probably could have thrown this to Eric and put it up there. But, you know, I'm showing you, Seth.
Just hold it up to the camera.
Yeah. If you guys can see this on camera 3. So this woman standing there with not yet human on her belly.
While holding her son.
Very pregnant belly. She looks like she's, you know, probably 7 months maybe. I mean, she's right at the later stages of her pregnancy. Yeah. Not yet human.
Yep.
Yeah. No, the evil that has crept in with this issue is mind-boggling and stunning. But what we started to talk about is the male or masculine responsibility in this, because it is men growing weaker over time in our culture. And not standing up for the lives of the unborn. That's and right. Also being driven into a small corner under the guise of, you can't talk about this because you don't have a uterus. Yeah. Matt Walsh, who is an absolute hero in my house, keeps making this argument that, wait a second, men can get pregnant now, so I do have a voice in this.
That's right. Yeah.
Which the left always kind of eats their own.
I do that sometimes on university campuses, Bryce. I'll be giving a lecture. I'll be like, I would like to open up my lecture this evening by just stating that I'm actually a woman, and as a woman with a uterus, I'm very excited for you to welcome my opinion as a woman who can speak with sexual credentials on this issue.
yeah, exactly. Well, again, I mean, all of their arguments are incoherent, and they're incoherent because they are, they are evil. And I'd actually give them more credibility, and I actually at least think that the ones that say, hey, I believe that we, should be allowed to kill these babies and we should have that ability and, all that stuff. I actually, I don't know, give them a little more juice for being honest in it. Yep. It's the people that play all of the games that, that bother me more because there's no logic behind anything that they do or say.
Yep. But they particularly have a problem with men, don't they? And so one of the comments I probably get the most on my YouTube channel and social media channels, and I rarely spend time reading these things, but, I get the email notifications sometimes, and one of the most repeated comments, Bryce, is, shut up, you're a man, right? Yeah. Or, oh, funny coming from you who'll never have a uterus, or, whatever it is. It's always this idea of the fact that I'm a man. And I always make jokes. I'll say, well, as a former fetus, speaking as a former fetus, or as a former preborn male, because obviously this is a human issue.
Right.
And I'm very grateful that my mother didn't abort me and kill me. And I was a male in the womb. So it's not a woman-man issue. It's just a human issue. But the left really hates strong men.
Yes.
And so they call what we would call healthy masculinity toxic masculinity. Usually when they refer to toxic masculinity, it's actually just good masculinity. Now, not in every case. You had the whole Me Too stuff. You had these sexually perverted, addicted people.
And by the way, none of that's masculinity.
Exactly.
That's sin, right? Yep. That's sin. That's evil. That's people abusing people. That's, all of that is evil. It has nothing to do with masculinity. I mean, I think when they talk toxic masculinity, it's just because, men with the strength that we have can perpetuate, a different kind of evil, right? Because of our strength, right? That strength can be used for evil, but I mean, is by that same note, there is toxic femininity. I mean, look at Amber Heard with Johnny Depp. I mean, there's things like that go on all the time.
Yeah, well, look at AOC. I mean, look at any radical member of the squad today who's in bed with Planned Parenthood. I mean, that's, we never talk about toxic femininity, but it is largely women at the forefront of the abortion rights movement. Now, interestingly, abortionists tend to be male. Abortionists who kill babies tend to be male, but the big faces that are the leaders of the abortion rights movement tend to be women.
I believe, though, that there's a lot of men that drive it, which is a really evil thing. So, yeah, certainly the abortionists, but there's the reason that there's a lot of men that endorse choice, quote unquote, endorse abortion or baby murders, because they also want to be free of the consequences of their dalliances.
Abortion is the ultimate example of male chauvinism.
And there's a lot.
It allows men to use women for sexual gratification and then expect that they'll deal with it if a child shows up.
Yeah. And almost all of the men in the radical left are there so that they can get with the crazy women on the radical left. I mean, I think a lot of those, truly, because that's how a lot of these, because most of the ideas on the left, especially the ones that are being espoused these days, are weak ideas, right? So you don't have strong men on the left, which is why the Antifa cats are all running around covering their faces and their umbrellas and all that sort of stuff, and they're all flimsy people. When we were doing our operations in Beverly Hills, I lined up against Antifa in a skirmish line, with my with our hats and bats and kind of ready to go. And what one of our guys said, and I think it was astute observation, is they're like hyenas. They would kind of walk to the line and they would like probe the line, and then they'd back up, and then they'd walk away like looking at you over their shoulder, and then they'd come back, and they were testing, and it literally looked like the way hyenas behave,
almost like wild. Showing an appearance of strength.
Seeing seeing where they can get in and cause trouble, but knowing that if they were to stand up against, I mean, one hard shove on those dudes and they're going to be on their butts and, crying and screaming. And by the way, you saw a lot of that footage when the police appropriately addressed as they should. Now you're watching in some of these abortion-led Antifa demonstrations and riots and protests that are going on right now. And I've been watching, because that's what we do. We've been watching a lot of the tapes. The police are in retreat because, unfortunately, over time, the police being defunded, the police have also lost. And we're talking some of the premier, and I don't want to name agencies because I've got friends in some of these agencies, but some of the most premier police agencies that are used to dealing with riots at the highest levels that have participated over the years and are the model for handling civil unrest in the world are retreating and backing down and telling them to disperse and not enforcing it because they have lost personnel. The defund the police movement, the diminishing of police, the devaluing of their role, all of that has caused some of the best guys, like the old salty dogs that have been there forever, that have the wisdom, that have the restraint, that have the ability, that can bring it when they need to. Yeah. Those guys have just retired. One of my best friends, who's a fellow Jiu Jitsu guy, and I mean a gnarly, awesome hero of a cop, said, "I'm retiring early. I'm out." He moved to Fiji, bought property in Fiji, and he opened a Jiu Jitsu school. Him and his wife. Wow. So you're seeing that happen all over the place. And now what's left are these guys that are being told that tactical patience is a new term that they've coined.
Another euphemism.
What was tactical patience? Uvalde, Texas, where they waited, and waited. They're no longer a lot of these agencies, and we're talking to these guys all the time, are no longer running in pursuit. So they're no longer pursuing bad guys. All this stuff is happening. Well, this is where I see as this abortion issue and the people protesting against it. This could be another one of those summer of riots, more terrorist attacks, all of that stuff, and I think that's what we're predicting, and we'll see. But this is because of weak men, and it's weak men that are in those protests doing this stuff alongside women that are being driven by evil. I mean, you're watching them in tears, screaming, cursing that they can't kill their kids.
Yep. I mean,
where are the men?
C.S. Lewis in 1943 or 1944 published The Abolition of Man. And it's a book that pastors need to reread today, because they're shepherds. You're the pastor. You're the leader. You need to understand these issues. And it's incredibly prophetic, Bryce. Oh, my goodness.
I'll have to read it. Yeah, that's not one I've read.
C.S. Lewis at the end, kind of closing out on World War II, just beforehand. My gosh, has it proven to be true? And so he says in The Abolition of Man, Bryce, he says, such is the tragicomedy of our position, we continue to clamor for the very qualities that we are rendering impossible. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and we bid the geldings be fruitful. So what is C.S. Lewis saying there? The entire premise of the book is built on this idea that the head rules the belly through the chest. So the abolition of man is men without chests. We remove the chest, and then we bitch and moan about the fact that there aren't men with chests. We remove the organ and demand the function. So when he says the head rules the belly through the chest, Bryce, the head represents the intellect. It's the rational man. It's what separates us from the animals, right?
Yeah.
We have moral accountability. We have moral intuitions. We have a rational nature. So the head, the intellect, rules the belly. The belly represents the animalistic man, right? The bad part of us, satisfy me. Sex, food, drugs, feed me. Right? That's the belly. So if the head rules the belly, then intellect rules raw appetite through the chest. What's the chest? Virtue, honor, morality. Virtue, honor, morality. So the abolition of man, Bryce, is men without chests. If you remove the chest, then the intellect rules the raw appetite with nothing to temper it in between.
Right.
And are human beings really good at justifying our decisions and behaviors?
Oh, yeah.
And justifying it as necessary? Oh, yeah. You remove the chest, you can justify anything. And so the abolition of man is built on this idea that C.S. Lewis was seeing even then in the universities. Now, remember, he's writing in England.
Right.
That the mainstreaming of relativism and postmodernism, that the macro narrative doesn't matter. It's always the micro narrative, right? It's the individual stories, my truth, right? That there's no objective moral structure. And so he saw this mainstreaming of relativism in the universities. And basically what he ends up saying is that this will lead to the abolition of man. We're going to attack the idea of the chest. We're going to remove the idea of the chest, that there's an objective standard for moral virtues and truth and honor. And then we're going to whine and ask, where are all the men? What happened to all the men? Why are we in the situation that we're in? And so if that was ever prophetic, it certainly is now. And that really explains so much of our sort of current cultural and political moment, is that the very thing necessary to keep evil in check and to build a healthy society has been removed. And so what do you expect? And of course, abortion really representing the ultimate failure of men, or the ultimate
protecting
castration
of the
men.
most innocent.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So a lot of people quote this now, and I was listening to him at the time make this comment. But Jordan Peterson talks about be dangerous and have it under voluntary control. And he said it in a couple of different ways, but
meekness.
Well, that's what I was going to bring it to, because the original time I think he said that was maybe on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
And he talked about meekness, and what he said was pretty fascinating, because he and I've said this before. I believe that with him we and I don't know exactly where he's at this moment in time, but I believe I was watching a C.S. Lewis in the making, because he went from this evolution of not saying that he wasn't a Christian, to, well, I'm a Christian, but it's complicated, to then in later podcasts saying I am a Christian. So I find that fascinating. Now, again, I don't know what his heart is about or anything that's going on with him. I got to sit at a lunch table with him, and hear him speak one of the last times before he went through his issue with benzodiazepine withdrawals and get off of all of that, which he's been super transparent with. But he talked about the word meekness and he was like totally blown away, like how fascinated, like the Bible is so studied,
the real translation,
the more studied, than anything else. And you can go and you can look at all these commentaries. And so he's like puzzling it through, and he says, so in what I've seemed to gather by, getting all these things, and Jordan Peterson's one of those guys when he says, I've thought a lot about this. He has, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So anyway, but he talks about that meekness being that, okay, I have a sword, I know how to use it, but I keep it sheathed. And so that's that voluntary control. And I do believe that is what
meekness is
society
needs.
Meekness
is not gentleness.
It's what civilization needs. Is you need very, very, very strong men who have it under voluntary control. And that control is morality, values, principles, all the things that God wants us to have as far as our, personality and who we are. He wants that all to be embedded in that. And these weak men that are, on the left, that are pushing these ideologies alongside these very destructive, evil women that are pushing this stuff, those are the first men to hide behind a guy like me and go, what do we do now, Chief, if something dangerous happens? And that's not to pump myself up, but I mean that is they will look in the room if the proverbial crap hits the fan. They will look for the nearest strong dude who goes, all right, here's what we're gonna do. That's and they're gonna go, okay, Chief, what do you need from me?
Totally.
And those women will do the same thing. And so where we turn around, and I believe that this is coming, and why I say that we are, in the decade of the warrior, is that times are getting tough, and they're going to get tough, and I predict they're going to get very tough, and I've talked about those reasons on our show and some of the things that are going to be happening. And when you do have to storm the beaches of Normandy, and when you are fighting for survival and all that stuff, then masculinity raises up. Also, morality does too. Because you have to have one with the other.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, there's no atheists in a foxhole kind of thing. All of a sudden, people are turning to God.
Right.
And people are turning to leaders, and they're turning to men who are strong, who are willing to fight. And that's one of the things that I'm encouraged about, because I'm seeing it happen. So when you're seeing these things, these bad times coming, I'm praising God for it.
That's awesome.
Because we need to turn this around, and we cannot have these, these patients running the insane asylum.
So, one of the things that the left hates to acknowledge, Bryce, is the significance and power of a male presence. But abortion actually is, while tragic, is actually a wonderful example of this. And so when you look at the data for why women choose abortion, the vast majority of the reasons submitted boil down to one common denominator. Can you guess it?
Men.
Yeah. So here's a study from the Guttmacher Institute, and the listeners to my show know that Guttmacher refers to Alan Guttmacher, a former president of Planned Parenthood. So this is Planned Parenthood's statistical research branch, not a pro-life source. And they did a study in 2005. You can find this on the Guttmacher Institute. It's been there for years. It's just called Reasons U.S. Women Have Abortions. So they just asked, right? And here were the findings.
Wait, no, let me guess. Rape and incest. It's got to be that.
Right, exactly. Or an ectopic pregnancy, and she was going to die. We're hearing that lie right now.
And miscarriage. Those are the real reasons, and everything else is meaningless.
Here were some of the most significant findings. The reasons most frequently cited were: 74% said having a child would interfere with a woman's education, work, or ability to care for dependents. Her work or her ability to care for dependents. I wonder who might help alleviate a situation that she feels where she can't adequately care for her dependents or can't leave for work.
Yeah, I wonder why God created the Institute of Marriage.
Right,
and
74%.
That partnership.
It continues. 73% said she could not afford a baby right now. Oh, Maybe because she's on a single income. Maybe because the man pieced out. That's 73%. Next one, 48% said she did not want to be a single mother or was having relationship problems. And so those are significant percentages.
Yeah.
And they all boil down to the abolition of man, to men without chests who aren't rising up to provide for and protect the child that they freaking created.
Well, let's talk about those two categories, but let's do it.
Oh, and then lastly, I'll just say,
Okay,
is that, and then what would have happened had the man not just been in the picture, but said, oh, baby, I'm going to take on 2 jobs. Do you think 74% would still say she's afraid to provide for dependents? Probably not.
Yeah.
If he said that, do you think 73% would have said that the reason was that they couldn't afford a baby right now? No, of course not. And as someone who's been in the pro-life movement my whole life, Bryce, I can't tell you how many women who have had abortions have told me, if my boyfriend or husband or fling had shown up and said, oh, we're raising this baby, and I'm going to give you a 300%. How many of those women have told me I would have never gotten an abortion?
I'll bet that is so much more overwhelming a number than people would ever believe.
Yep.
Because that is, if they think they're going to go at it alone, you know, and this dude just, you know, knocked him up and, you know, may not be there in the picture and isn't really committed to it, then, you know, then, oh gosh, okay, I guess I'm being told by society it's no big deal.
Right.
You know, I'm going to just go and have an abortion. I've talked to women and I've had them, you know, burst into tears because we were having a debate about abortion. And I said, hey, listen, and I was just inspired in the moment, like, look, because I didn't know, but I just said, hey, if you had an abortion, God could forgive you. And I watched this gal just go, boom, like tears explode out of her eyes, like projectile tears.
Wow.
And a lot of these women regret it horribly, but they were told that it was no big deal.
Yep.
It's just a mass of tissue. It's, you know, nothing. Yeah, it's like removing a polyp, whatever. You know, no, you be in and out. You know, no big deal, right? Yep. And some of those women were unable to have children later. It continued on down the path of sacrificing for their career.
Yep.
And I've had dozens of women that have worked for me over the years where they've admitted that they made the worst possible decisions in their life in regards to that, and they're miserable and alone now.
Yep.
And that's a common thing. But going to the, I think it was the second point where they talked about they couldn't afford it, or they, you know, all that, right?
Couldn't care for dependents.
Yeah. We have a little bit of and this is a lack of manliness in even the Christian culture right now of standing up and getting after it for your lady, right?
Yeah.
And that's happening right now because I talk to believers who are couples that are married that are like, well, you know, we're not really ready to have kids and that kind of thing. That never occurred to me, and maybe that's just how I'm wired. I was like, hey, you know, I mean, we went for like 3 years, not trying not to, but not trying to, kind of a thing. And then boom, it happened, and we're like, yeah, this is great. But there was not one thought in my head, and we weren't financially really well off or anything like that. We were both working at the time,
right?
But everything about me was, I am going to figure a way that my wife can stay home and have babies. You know, and we did.
That's right.
And my brother-in-law, to his credit, because you know he doesn't make a lot of money or anything. You know, he works for Tesla. And his wife was a nurse, and in the evenings, because, you know, she needed to quit her job, they just had their second, you know, and he's like, 12 weeks old or something now. Right. They just had their second. Their oldest is like 16 months old, you know, so they were like super close together. My math is probably off there. But she's just a little toddler, and he's like driving for Uber and Lyft in the evening, and he's doing like, you know, working every second that he can to make this thing happen.
Yep.
We need more men to be standing up, stepping up, and doing that.
That's right.
And, you know, you don't need to have a big, gnarly apartment. You don't need to own a home. You don't need to. The fact is you will rise to the occasion if you have that mindset.
That's
you
right.
will step up and you will do more. And there's a reason that married men make more than single men, and there's a reason where married men with children make more than both.
Right. That's a great point.
Because, you know, you have to step up and get after it. You know,
That's
and
right.
I was blessed so much by having kids. You know, my maturity. You know, your heart grows multiple sizes, overnight. I remember that moment when Angela, my oldest, came out, and I was like, whoa, I was deer in the headlights. They're like, hey, do you want to hold her? I'm like, give me a second. Not because I was afraid of holding her, because I could hold babies. That wasn't it. I was just like overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. And so I always joke, that I'm the Grinch, and, my heart grew 2 sizes just in looking at her. But it's true. My capacity for love in that moment grew. And you need
work.
Yeah, and you need to stand up. So the Christians, because it's happening. There are Christian couples right now. I hear that all the time. Get your act together.
Yep.
Get your butt working. Yep. Make it happen. Do not make finances a consideration.
That's right. Yeah.
You will regret that.
Well, this is a podcast for another time, but for the Christian, procreation is actually not really an option. You don't get to pick or choose. If you're a Christian and you understand that the first couple were told the first mandate to fill the earth and subdue it, how do you think you fill the earth? That's referring to procreation. Now, for the people who are going, Seth just said that he hates people who can't have kids. Okay, no. Okay, obviously there's issues, but all things being equal, the mandate for Christians in marriage is not to keep the love between yourself. This physical act of sex is so comprehensive and unitive that sometimes 9 months later it requires a name. And that's significant. Yeah. And that's part of the mandate. And former Governor Mitch Daniels, Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels, years ago, Bryce, was asked, how do we beat the libs? And he said, well, you can either outfox them, outmaneuver them, outthink them in politics. He said, which is tricky because they're pretty clever, or you can outbreed them. Yeah. And I would recommend the latter because the latter is more fun.
100%. Well, listen, and I've said this before, and again, my heart goes out to people who cannot have kids. Right. I know that there are, and I talk about it with, declining testosterone and some of the things that are going on in our environment that are weird. Vaccines, there's a whole bunch of things that are putting, I believe, and going to be putting gnarly pressure on fertility. But my heart goes out to the folks that cannot. Yep. Okay. And it does not mean that they are valueless because they cannot. Yep. So this is not about them. Yep. But for those folks that are waiting and delaying and choosing not to have kids out of selfishness, because that's what a lot of people are like. Well, just we're more into traveling. We're more we're just thinking we're not people. There is no other reason to live. Yeah. And I say that again. I want to be sensitive to the folks that can't. Yeah. Yeah. But hey, adopt. Be the world's greatest aunt and uncle, whatever. Yeah. But the profound effect that having a child has on you, and the feeling you have, like it's you will all of a sudden realize that, oh yeah, this is why I'm here. Yep. You are fulfilling a mandate from God.
Yep, that's right. Let's wind down with this then, Bryce. I think abortion represents the litmus test of masculinity. Just as it sort of represents the litmus test of a republic. Do we take these foundational fundamental principles as true or not, as self-evident, that we're created in the image of God, inalienable rights, that among these are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? But in another way, abortion also represents this litmus test of masculinity. And what I mean by that is this. If you can't stand up against the slaughter of unborn babies, and as a man, if you were involved in procreating that child and you can't stand up against your woman, whoever she is, wanting to kill that child, what can you stand against? Yeah. Right? It's like if you can't stand up against that, then the culture of death will forever own you. Yeah. Because they know that if they can get you apathetic and tolerant towards that,
you'll get sold on anything.
There's no end to their political project. I think it was Aristotle who said that tolerance and apathy are the last virtues of a dying society, because we should not be tolerant of evil. And what could be more evil than forcibly dilating a woman's cervix and sticking forceps up there and ripping the arms off of her child's shoulders? People are like, Seth, why do you speak so graphically about abortion? Because you've probably never seen abortion. You probably don't have to look. I look at these children. I look at the remains of abortion. We need to speak clearly about what's happening. And if you tolerate that as a man, there's nothing else you won't tolerate. So we as pro-lifers, Bryce, say if you don't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right.
Mm-hmm.
But the left says if you can get the right to life wrong and invert the right to life, there's nothing else you can't invert.
Yeah.
And if they can get the American public, but men in particular, to remain silent towards and apathetic towards the murder of children, they know that they'll own you forever.
They've done it. They've done it intentionally. They've really tried to neuter our voices, emasculate us. It's interesting, as people watching this video can tell, I just came from my barber, and I got a fresh haircut. And I was talking to him about this, saying that I was going to be, on your show later today and, talk about the issue. And so he started to do the, typical thing. Well, man, I'm kind of uncertain about this, because a lot of people are uncertain.
Right.
They aren't, and most of them are definitely not for like late term stuff. Most of them are like, but then they get into this like quasi, like, I'm not really sure.
Right.
We need to say, well, I'm sure. And here's why.
Yep.
And you need to boldly talk about it. And then towards the end of that conversation, he's a newlywed guy, and he does have a Christian wife, and he's, been kind of speaking to him for some time, and, he's a
nice.
Good dude. And so he's coming along, but at the end of that conversation, now he's a lot less uncertain about it, and we need to do that. We need to do it without fear, and we need to do it without being worried that we're going to offend people, because now is the time to actually, you can do it with graciousness. You don't have to be combative like, sometimes people get, but we do have to be bold, and we do have to speak up for these, unborn kids that these evil people want to murder.
And you know what, Bryce? Just as physical atrophy occurs through not using your muscles, so does moral atrophy occur through not using your voice.
Amen.
And so we'll finish with this as the word to men listening, whether this is on radio, podcast, or both. The longer you tolerate, that's a bad word, okay?
Yep.
The longer you tolerate this evil and refuse to speak out, the sooner you will find that you no longer know who you are. And here's what I mean by that. Czesław Miłosz was this Polish anti-communist dissident, and I've read some of what he's written and what he did, but I encourage you guys to read some of actually his writings. Czesław Miłosz, and he talked about this idea called ketman. Now, ketman, Bryce, was this Persian word that referred to like the appearance of Islamic orthodoxy while inwardly dissenting. Now, there's a whole history about that, of course, of Persians and Muslims, but to go along and play the role of Islamic orthodoxy while inwardly dissenting, to go along to get along, to not be oppressed, right? To show that you were going through the rhythms, but inwardly you were saying, I don't agree with Islamic orthodoxy. So Czesław Miłosz, this Polish anti-communist dissident, he talked about this word as ketman as well, because there were a lot of people who were ideologically opposed to communism, but went along to get along. Right, they played the role. Inwardly, they were dissenting; they didn't like it, but they wouldn't stand against it. And here's the problem: an actor who portrays his character long enough eventually becomes that character.
That's true.
So as long as you tell yourself inwardly, Bryce, but I don't like abortion, I'm against it. Meanwhile, California is like forcing taxpayer dollars to pay for the babysitting of women for their children in Arizona as they travel to California and kill their children, like dystopian sci-fi, like 2000 like picture like novels or something. It's like what this is happening
straight out of science
and you won't even speak against it. You won't even stand against the slaughter of unborn children. One day you will wake up and find that you have no chest left.
Yeah.
Well, and you have become the character of the coward that you played for decades.
Well, let me add to that, because good men do not tolerate evil. We are not to be tolerant of evil. We are to rout it out.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Reagan had a great line. He said that evil is powerless when the good are unafraid.
Amen.
And good men made this country great because we were willing to stand against evil.
Yeah.
But we are living in one of the most evil regimes ever.
Yeah.
We live in a quote unquote free country, we're told, right? Mm-hmm. That's built on the mutilated bodies of 65 million children. Are we really free?
Nope.
Thanks for coming on, brother.
Thank you, man. I'm going to miss you.
That was a pleasure, man.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning into the show today. I knew that you would enjoy Bryce Eddy and I's conversation. Go follow Liberty Station, my home church, Godspeed Calvary Chapel. Follow them on Rumble, Rumble, Liberty Station. You can also catch you where, Bryce, on radio?
So we are locally here in Ventura County on KDAR, and we will be launching again on Salem's platform. So we just got the press releases and all that stuff going out for that. So you'll also find us, popping around on radio and other people's shows to promote what we're doing. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Liberty Station, Bryce Eddy. If you want to learn more about Unaborted or my ministry, go to SethGruber.com. If you want to join the White Rose Resistance and tell your children and grandchildren that you joined a resistance movement to stand against the genocide of abortion, go to www.thewhiterose.life, thewhiterose.life. Follow me on social media. Follow Bryce Eddy as well. He strikes fear into the heart of the secular progressive culture because he knows what a man is, and he can define what a woman is, which makes him all the more masculine because of it. Thanks for joining the show today. We'll see you next week. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted.